Because there's that music. And today we welcome Stephen Lambe, the author of the book that basically covers every Yes song. And they're on this recording, so in about 20 hours when this is over, we'll start the interview. Just kidding.
Do I have to talk about all of them?
Steve.
Yeah. And like we said, we have Stephen Lambe, author of Yes, every album, every song, revised edition actually just came out recently. So yeah, from Sonicbond Publishing. And yeah, it's great to have you here. How's everything going?
No, it's a pleasure to be here. It's going great. It's 8 p.m. in the UK. I've just had dinner, so if I fall asleep at any stage,
It won't be us or me.
give me a prod. It'll be fine.
I want to start out by saying, and we'll dig into this. This is a great book, folks. If you're a hardcore, freakishly hopeless Yes fan, this book is for you. If you're just now, for whatever reason, finding out about Yes, this book is for you. If you're anywhere in between, this book is for you. A mountain of work it must have been. We'll get into that. And one of the things that Steve and I respect you so much for, Stephen, is that you've opened the invitation where if anyone spots any corrections or anything like that, they can write you, which is great. And I have one I want to bring up right now. It's regarding Fragile. Pete Best plays drums on Fragile. It's not Bill Bruford.
What?
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Actually, no, but there's a story behind. No, there isn't. There isn't.
Nice. Steve, go ahead and kick it off with the the interview.
Right. So something you mentioned briefly in your book is the Wembley 1978 concert that was broadcast by BBC Radio. And today is actually the 45th anniversary of that concert. Was it this particular show that was your first Yes concert, or was it one of the other nights?
No, it was. I genuinely, I cannot remember which show I was at.
Oh.
I was 16, so all I remember is my mother drove me to the show. I think it was a weeknight, though. I don't think it was because they did a matinee and a show in the evening on the Saturday.
Okay.
So I think it must have been one of the earliest. It must have been one of the earlier ones. I remember saving up for it. Cost £5.
Oh man.
And that was expensive in 1978.
Yeah, I think we're like a year apart because I saw the Tormato tour in 78. That was October and I was 15.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you saw the first American leg, presumably.
Yeah, and then I saw it at the LA Forum, sat in the 6th row, great seats, first time seeing them, first time seeing in the round or anything like that. And then I caught the second leg in 79 at Long Beach Arena, way up, which was actually okay. Having seen them before up close and then get that big scope view of everything was really a delight to see both perspectives. It was neat.
Yeah, I was up in the gods. And I remember, I do have a distinct memory. It wasn't only my first Yes show; it was my first show of any sort. So I think that's in the book actually. And I remember finding my seat. I went on my own. Then my mother drove me to the show and picked me up afterwards. I remember going and I remember walking up to my seat because obviously it was in the round at Wembley Arena, the Empire Pool Wembley, as it was called then.
Oh yeah,
I think, and I remember thinking, "This is high up." I also remember thinking it was loud, actually, but I think that was because I'd never been to a live show in my entire life. So it wasn't compared to, I don't know, seeing AC/DC about 10 years later, I think.
Yeah, I saw Led Zeppelin the year before, and it was loud. It was my first concert, and it was freakish.
Loud Zeppelin.
Loud Zeppelin. That'd be a great cover.
Yeah.
That could be a tribute band name.
Yeah.
Also, because the sound was so good, when I got used to the volume, I thought all shows would be like that.
Yeah.
All the sound system at all gigs would be like that. And oh God, I've experienced some terrible sound.
Yeah, same here.
And
Yeah.
There's a show I left because it was so loud. And this is years into adulthood where my ears, I already suffered a lot of hearing loss. So it wasn't me. It was King Crimson, bless their hearts, on the Thrack tour. By the
Oh,
third song, I had to leave. It was so loud. I was nauseous. I was experiencing like Meniere's disease or something, and I just had to leave. It was John Paul
Wow.
Jones opened for them, so it was worth the trip. It was great. That was his
wow.
second tour. But yeah, man, that was unbelievably loud. And I mentioned that on Drum Talk TV, our other show,
Hmm.
in a post. And Paul Masaleno actually saw it and commented and said, "Sorry, bloke." Like he was the drummer for the show and he's apologizing. It was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, are you guys aware that show there is now a proper live recording of that show? Obviously, the BBC recorded uh, one of the shows,
So
but
there is or there isn't.
there is
Oh,
well, first of all, the BBC recorded it and they put it out as a 2 hour show on the Friday Rock Show, which was a Friday night show, and it was, so that would have been early 1979. And a guy called John D, who is a sort of well-known Yes fan, lives in Australia, has been putting together a full proper record, not full proper recording, but a sort of a full CD record quality version of it.
mm-hmm.
That he's trying to persuade Warner's to release, and that's happening right now. So we'll see what happens with that. But given that was my first show, I would, and that's including some of the parts that they didn't broadcast on the BBC as well.
Yeah.
They didn't broadcast Future Times or Rejoice or
Yeah.
Oh, that's
some other
right. I remember
some other
this now.
parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at the 78 calendar, it looks like that particular show was on a Saturday. And yeah, John D put out a recent post where he put out an update and how someone sent him a soundboard recording that I think had some of the tracks in higher quality. So he's asking if there's anyone else who might have. I'm trying to find the original post. I had it up here,
It's
and
he's got the BBC recording, and they've restored some of the parts that the BBC recorded but
yeah,
weren't broadcast. So that's Madrigal and the Wakeman solo, and they only broadcast part of Roundabout. The only part that the BBC don't have is Future Times Rejoice, and that's the part he's trying to get
yeah.
a good quality version of.
So I found the post, and his request is if anyone has a really high quality copy of Wembley 78, check if it has Future Times and Rejoice on it. Because if it does, it might be higher quality than some of the stuff that he has. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
and I'll link this post in the show notes and post in the comments. But yeah, so trying to get the best quality recording of this to present it to Warner's and hopefully have it released. I think that'd be a wonderful thing to release. Dun, dun, dun,
Hey,
dun, dun.
Yeah.
which they didn't play. Oh.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think I just a couple shows and then it was too difficult. And yeah.
Yeah.
Regarding the book, Stephen, with each edition, did you go back and re-listen to everything to see if your take changed or for context, or did you just listen to subsequent releases since the previous editions? And what was like your evaluation process like?
That's a really good question, actually. The answer is because I published it through my own publishing company. It has allowed me to actually tweak the book a little bit as I've reprinted it, and the book's sold very well over the years. So there have been a few reprints. But all I did with those with the tweaking was maybe bring it up to date in the final chapters and add whatever new album was out.
Right.
So the previous reprint actually was done recently enough to have the Quest in it. But that was actually only I think I only reprinted about 100 copies or something. So this new version was a chance to completely revise the book word by word. I looked at every word. I didn't necessarily change it.
Got it.
But it was also an opportunity to go back and listen to some things that I thought I might have changed my mind about. I didn't listen to every song. I didn't. Obviously, I had to listen to the new stuff I was reviewing. One album I did go back and listen to again because I thought my opinion might have changed a little bit was Tales.
Oh, interesting.
And in fact, my opinion has changed a little bit, and I did update what I said a little tiny bit.
Okay, that's interesting. Now I wish now I need to buy an older edition and just go to that section and
No,
skip it.
it's not. It's not. It's definitely not worth buying for that. It is worth buying for it is probably worth buying if you've got the first edition, which some people will have. That won't have. Well, it won't have From a Page. It won't have The Quest, and it won't have Mirror to the Sky.
Right.
And it's not really worth buying for any updated thoughts I may have.
So tell us if are you willing to spill the beans a little bit, use it as a commercial, and tell us what did change in your mind or your feelings towards Tales, and in which direction and what part of Tales.
Oh, I've always been, I still am, I guess. I'm one of those people that thinks it's too long. I'm in that camp, and that there is a brilliant, I wouldn't say 45 minutes. I'd probably say there's a brilliant 60 minutes in there. And I went back and listened particularly to the remembering. This was partly prompted by a guy I know called a friend of mine called Andy Tillison, who's he's in a band called The Tangent. He played my festival earlier this year, and he played a little segment from the remembering. Actually, and it was one of the segments you probably wouldn't expect him to play. It was a little ambient section. I thought, oh, that was really nice. Maybe I ought to give it another go. So I did. My opinion hasn't changed much about it, but it has changed a little bit. So I was probably a little bit nicer about the remembering that happened previously.
Nice, interesting.
Yeah. I've always been a bit of an apologist for the Ancient anyway. So I was already saying relatively nice things about that, unlike most people.
Yeah, and because one of the things I was wondering was whether you did like a complete 180 on any songs between editions, you know?
No, not really. No, not really. I can't think. I mean, the music's so ingrained. It's stuck in my head now that I'm very unlikely to go around and say, yeah, okay, well, I used to love. I think I can't remember whether I put it in the book. I've never been a big fan of Hearts. 90125.
Interesting.
And I like that a little bit more now.
Okay.
But I genuinely cannot remember whether my review of Hearts in the book actually reflects that. But that's because aside from this, I've done loads and loads more research and work on the 90125 period. You Stephen, you've definitely seen the little reel I did about the Trevor Rabin interview I did, because
and Prague Magazine
used the screen capture for it.
I mean, that was a bucket list item, right? Interviewing Trevor.
Yeah, that was well, the background to that is that Jerry Ewing, the editor of Prog, I've done a few pieces for Prog Magazine now, and Jerry, the author, the editor, knew that I was a fan of 80s Yes as well as 70s Yes, and I'd written about my like of 80s Yes in that book that we talked about with David Watkinson whenever it was.
Yes, in the 1980s.
Yeah. So he asked me ages ago. He was preparing the cover features for this year, and basically months and months and months ago, he asked me to write a cover feature about the story of 90125, which will be in the next issue of Prog.
Oh, great.
So while we were doing that, as things came up, he sort of said, okay, well, we've been asked to do an interview with John Anderson to promote his shows in London. Do you want to do the interview? So I said, yeah. So I did. And then the opportunity, when Rio was, a couple of months away from coming out, again, he said, we got to do Trevor Rabin. Do you want to do Trevor Rabin? And I sort of said, yeah. So I got to do the piece in Prog Magazine. I did the piece about John Anderson, but that was a little news story. So actually, I spoke to John for about half an hour, and it was lovely. But it was It was short. I got 70 minutes with Trevor, which was
That's cool.
which was really, really good. But bearing in mind, I had to cover his entire career in that time.
Yeah, he's a great interview. Steve, when did we have him on? Like 3 weeks ago?
No, like
It was
over a
longer than
month
that.
ago now.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
time just is so blurry for me. And I see some comments. We will get to comments in just a moment. One of the things we wanted to ask you was with the Yes album, you make a point, which Steven agrees with, by the way, which is that we've heard the live versions of those songs so much and heard them in better form that the Yes album is not typically one that might reach for people might not reach for as much as many of the albums. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think listening to it now, I think it feels a little bit sterile. If One of the good things about it is that they've moved on, not musically, though they had obviously
Yeah.
the quality of the recording had moved on so much just in that few months between Time and a Word and the Yes album, that in that respect it sounds modern, if you see what I mean. It sounds like this lost some of that like 60s boom you get in some of the
Yeah.
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 Um, uh, but having said that, the versions of those songs, maybe yours is no disgrace accepted. They sound quite sterile compared to some of the fantastic live versions we've had over the years.
Yeah. Almost very compressed from a sonic
Yeah,
point of
yeah,
view. Yeah.
yeah. But you had to do those versions to get to what we've.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think about that about Fragile, for instance. I love those versions. Um, Even though it was just wherever it was a year later.
Yeah.
I love the Fragile versions. I don't love the Yes album versions of those songs so much.
Well, you know
Really,
what really makes the difference, right? It's Roger Dean's cover.
that must be it.
Yeah, all of a sudden the music sounds totally different.
It kind of does take you somewhere else with that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. It's true. It does. It does.
Just the
Yeah,
whole persona, I think, of the music and the band, the brand,
yeah,
it plays into that somehow psychologically, especially someone like me who discovered Yes through Fragile first, not long after it came out. I was really young when I got into Yes, and then went forward to bought Yes songs and Close to the Other Edge at the same time, listen to Yes songs first, and then
mm.
Close to the Edge, and then Relayer, and then like sequentially through Tormato. I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I didn't hear those first couple albums till after that, and then it was like, oh, this is like when dinosaurs were roaming the earth, and the recording equipment suited that as well. It was just kind of weird. It was like listening to Paul McCartney's new album with today's production, then going back and listening to the White Album or something like that, and going, "What the fuck's going on here?"
Yeah, yeah. No, no, no. I know what you mean. I can't remember what order I heard the albums in. I know I heard Fragile and Tomato run about the same time. That was my introduction.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, but I can't remember what order I listened to everything else in. I know I had Yesterdays before I had the first two albums,
Mm.
but I don't remember being particularly disappointed when I heard the first two albums. I just thought, oh yeah, that's Yes, as they were in 69, 70. It's fine. It's fine. And I like them still.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
the Yes album as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm more likely to reach for the first two albums over the Yes album because there's such a novelty and obscurity to them. It's like reaching for something that they don't play that often.
Yeah, and it also feels like a different time, whereas for some reason the Yes album doesn't. The Yes album feels like the start of modern Yes, whereas
Mm.
the other
Yeah, that's a
two
good
albums
take.
feel like they were part of a different era somehow.
Yeah. Before Steve's next question, I do want to check in. David Watkinson says, "Hi, you legend, you watch this space in November, Prague Magazine. Cool." And
Yeah.
Steve did drop in that other link he was referring to regarding Tails. So yeah, back to you,
No, I
No,
Steve.
thought,
regarding the John D's request, and
Yeah.
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 So what was your reasoning for the order in which he talked about the Paris sessions and Tornado outtakes
Oh,
tracks in the book.
good question. Yeah, good question. I just thought it's a difficult one, um, because I'm probably, although I didn't change that section at all when I revised the book,
Okay.
I'm probably a little bit clearer on their provenance now than I was.
Mm.
So I wasn't 100% sure. And there's a lot of people that aren't. I mean, it's not just me, who wasn't. Some of the when some of those demos were recorded, it's not quite certain. So I was just building a little. I was just covering my arse a little bit, really, and building a little bit of extra doubt and uncertainty into it. I mean, obviously, we pretty much know what the Paris session tracks are. It was just some of those demos that
Yeah.
when John Anson sat in his living room and sang Days into a microphone, I have, who can possibly know uh, without asking? And he probably doesn't know either. So
Yeah, it's been so long, so
yeah.
yeah.
So it was. I wanted to cover the Paris sessions in context, in chronological context.
Yeah.
It's just the rest of the tracks that I wasn't quite sure about, so I just put them in the same chapter, essentially.
Okay, because even with the Paris section tracks, they're not in they're not in complete alphabetical order. So I was just curious, like, um, about the order of the songs in which you want to discuss them, or if it was a little random and you're just like,
Yeah,
okay,
no,
I'll listen to this one, then the next this one.
my
So
my my answer is probably I can't remember.
okay,
But I didn't.
That's fair.
But I didn't. I didn't change that. Or I didn't change that section at all for the new edition. So it's as it was. It was the Stephen that wrote that was Stephen from 2018. And I'd love to ask him, but he's not here. So
yeah. And going back to 90125,
no.
something that I noticed while reading this was that
And you're probably the only one that noticed this, Steve, just so you know. But go ahead.
is that the 90125 section begins on page 83, which is very nice because that's the year
Oh,
the
okay.
album came out. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't. And in fact, it's probably on a completely different first edition. Is probably on a completely different page.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That is interesting, though. And you also mentioned regarding 90125 that ideally, had that lineup put out their follow up album much, much sooner, that probably would have been the right thing to do. I'm not sure there's anyone that would disagree with that. And then later in the book, you mentioned that had Talk been that album, Talk would have been very much better received. And
Well,
I
yeah,
tend to,
if it was released in the 80s, yeah.
yeah, I agree with that because I think Talk didn't. I was surprised that Talk didn't do as well as it did. It's an amazing recording production wise. Probably the first album ever, recorded to disc. Had it been recorded in the 80s, it probably wouldn't have been and it would have sounded different. But I think Stephen and I
Yeah.
both agree that in place of Big Generator or
Or even
certainly,
before.
yeah, closer to the follow up and a sooner follow up. How do you not ride that wave and capitalize on it when the irons are hot? That's really weird how they let that. I don't know if it was complacency or rested on their laurels or management BS that we've all heard about over and
It
over.
it was many things, but it was mainly the band. I think it was. If you imagine, I mean, going back to 90125, because again, I've done huge amounts of research into 90125 in the last few months. So I'm happy to talk about that if you want. Some of it will be in the next issue of Prog, but some of it won't. In fact, I'm making a book out of it. I think
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
90125 came together in such a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
There are essentially there are four steps and they're very unusual steps. Normally a band, they come off tour, they go back into the studio, they record the album with whatever material they've got, then they go back on the road again.
Yeah.
90125 was recorded in a very contrived way, or was created in a very contrived way.
Yeah.
So what happened after that? I'll happily go into detail if you want, but regarding Big Generator, what happened was they recorded 90125 in this really weird contrived way, and then all of a sudden they were a band, and
Yeah.
Bond as
and
a
they
band.
hadn't done that before in that
No,
lineup.
and it didn't work. And all of a sudden they had Trevor Horn in the studio. That all of a sudden they were massive rock stars again,
Yeah.
having thought, what the hell's going to happen with our careers in 1980, 81? All of a sudden they're massive rock stars again. They go off into a castle in Italy, start recording, and basically they don't do any.
Yeah.
And it all spirals from there, which leads to Trevor Rabin having to rescue the album basically in a recording studio for several weeks in Los Angeles. So it's basically they messed it up, and they would admit that, I'm sure. You know, they just they something that should have taken 6 months to record took 2 years.
Yeah. It's an odd sounding album sonically as well. Some of it just sounds, and I think, to be fair, I don't think I've ever listened to the whole album other than on the original vinyl release. And the EQ overall, the mastering just sounds odd to me, especially coming off of 90125, which had, what do you say about that? The way that sounded. And then Big Generator just sounds so odd. So that's without even getting into the compositions and all that stuff. But regarding to your other point, Stephen, when you say they went to a point from what's going to happen with us to being the biggest rock stars of the year with 90125, I read from an actor or another musician years and years and years ago, they said sometimes the hardest act to follow is your own. And I think they were in that space, being in that state, as you did mention, that now all of a sudden they're a band and they hadn't worked like that as a band yet. And it just...
too many. They had to go. They hadn't.
No history to follow because they hadn't done it.
It's to all intents and purposes, it was the sophomore album, wasn't it? So, so it was almost like starting again.
Yeah.
And what happens with second albums? Sometimes like rabbit in headlights. What do we do now?
Right. Exactly. It was a neat tour. I remember seeing the tour. The tour was neat.
We didn't get it here.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right. They didn't do Europe at all, or
the Talk tour. No.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Or Talk. Wow, I forgot about that. I remember that from your book too.
Yeah, I think I may have played my CD copy of Big Generator to Dad, but it was like so long ago. So yeah. But I
played it quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, like I don't remember the last time I played the CD itself, but I do listen to the songs on, the official channels, and it's already just like really ingrained in me. But while we're on Trevor Rabin, would care to share any thoughts on his Rio album now that we're a few weeks into its release?
I really like it. Obviously I had the, hopefully like you guys did, I had the benefit of listening to it a long time before it was released.
Yeah.
I still haven't heard the bonus tracks because I haven't bought it yet.
Which is
the
bonus tracks are pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard the original version of Fragile, but I haven't heard any of the other bonus tracks. But the main album itself, it's a grower. It's apart from the Big Mistake and Push, maybe the big sort of melodic rock songs. It's going to take people some getting into. It throws so many genres at it, sometimes in the same song. You guys said in your review, that, and it's completely correct. It's is it Tumbleweed? There's 3 different genres within the same song.
Yeah, and it wasn't at all what I expected to begin with.
No.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Yeah.
I mean, people are comparing it to Can't Look Away, but of course they were recorded under completely different circumstances. Can't Look Away is Trevor's label attempting to market Trevor as a solo artist, expecting chart placings and stuff, high chart placings, and throwing money at a crazy 80s style video.
I remember that.
With like the Dalmatian spots type thing.
That's the one. Yeah.
And the really long arms. It's a wild video, that one.
And it is a wild video. And so they were expecting hits from that, or at least they were hoping for hits. Whereas This album is just Trevor doing whatever he wants.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
not only doing whatever he wants, but that whatever he wants is coming from years and years and years of doing movie score music and just life happening for decades, maturing as a person, and all these things up here that fed his creative process with
Yeah,
decades, literally, of other music he'd done and life events, and then to dump all that out onto one
yeah,
CD. No
yeah,
wonder there's so many different things on there, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's clearly what he wants to do. I My only negative comment might be, I wonder, there's so much in there. It's so densely packed. I wonder if people are still going to be listening to it in a year.
Interesting,
Um,
yeah.
Mm.
uh,
I
but
per I
hopefully they are.
personally like I get that. I
Yeah,
personally like it. I think I'm just a little weird or different where I can hear something on an album that as long as I like it, to me I don't care how far apart the genres are or anything, but I do understand for most people, for the masses, that might make it just too disjointed for some people or
yeah.
disconnect,
That's
but
my only thought. But I
yeah.
really like it. It took me
Yeah.
3 plays
Yeah. Well,
for it to
something
go.
else you both mentioned that I want to bring up is you mentioned bonus tracks. And one of the things I've known, but really didn't realize till I read your book and we got to the part about the quest, is sort of a general question that I haven't asked Steve this either. To me, I find it odd that the term bonus tracks is used on a first release of an album. What makes them bonus? Isn't that just part of the album? I think that's a weird justification. Whereas before, bonus tracks would be when Going for the One is re-released and you hear a couple run-throughs and you get Abilene, after Tormato. Or to me, those are bonus tracks. So how does one delineate bonus tracks on an album that just came out? I don't get that.
Um, well, first of all, it's what Inside Out do. They've always done that.
Okay.
Mm.
Like for 20 years, that's been there. I don't know. I don't know if there's any other labels that work like that, but Inside Out have always done that.
Ah,
So they've kind of said, here's the album, here's a few extra things. If you look at some of the let's think of an example. Neil Morse or Spock's Beard, Transatlantic, maybe. That's
mm-hmm.
the opportunity for them to do some covers, that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Now, I reckon what probably happened with Yes, I don't know, I haven't asked them, but what happened was they recorded a bunch of tracks. They sort of said, they all sat down and said, okay, well, here's the album. What are we going to do with these other songs? Do we stick them on the album in appropriate places, or do we do what Inside Out would prefer, which is to offer them on another CD? I'm not entirely sure why
That
how
sounds
those tracks
reasonable.
came to be those, if you see
Yeah.
what I mean.
Maybe,
But
yeah, if the band themselves or the record label doesn't feel they fit in with the playability of a particular song list that makes up enough for enough album,
yeah,
but yet they're
yeah,
still good
I
enough to release, they put them over here and call them bonus tracks.
I'm certain they wouldn't have done that, and if they had been recording for any other label.
Mm.
It's a very
Very inside out.
so I think it's very typical of Inside Out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
because with Inside Out, I think before these more recent Yes albums, to my knowledge, my only frame of reference from their label was the Anderson Stolt album, Invention of Knowledge, and I don't think that had bonus tracks, at least on the CD release. So,
Hmm.
but when the new Yes albums came out, I did understand, like, I do understand why they're called bonus tracks. It's because, okay, they don't fit with sort of the continuity they're trying to establish with these other tracks. So they consider them sort of, this is the main album, and these are the tracks that are outside of the main album. So I do understand why they're called bonus tracks. It's just putting them on a separate disc that's kind of odd to me, you know?
Yeah, no, it's odd to me too, but it's, as I say, it. I suppose with another label, they might have just been called bonus tracks on the same CD, but
Right.
it's what Inside Out. I don't have any specific insight or knowledge into Inside, but I know that from a lot of the experience of buying Inside Out releases, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
Well, while we're on the subject of the newer albums, um, in the book you talk about preferring the Quest over Mirror to the Sky, which is interesting because we tend to see the opposite opinion across Yes fandom. Although I think Dad prefers Mirror, whereas I'm still not quite sure. Like they're
Oh,
pretty
come
close.
on.
They're pretty close to me, but I do feel that I get more emotional at certain points on the Quest, particularly on A Living Island, like you've expressed.
that's exactly it. Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because I've heard a lot of people say, I'm not going to name names. Uh, how can you not
Dave
like
Watkinson.
Mirror to the Sky? Because it's giving you precisely what you want from a Yes album. Therefore, you are required to like it.
That's
Um,
interesting.
And that's kind of
and
silly because not all Yes fans want the same thing, but
That's
no,
true.
but they're saying that okay, you want long form tracks from Yes, you're getting them on this album. So you must like this album, and I think well, yeah, but music it's completely subjective. It either moves you
right.
or it doesn't. Though I like Mirror to the Sky and I like some of the long form tracks, there's bits that don't quite work for me. With the Quest, I was very moved by Living Island because it's talking about COVID and COVID times, not talking about COVID specifically. And there are some other tracks where I thought, okay, well, the album may not be very particularly cohesive, but I think this song, whichever it is those writers and those musicians doing the best they can with it with this material. They're doing what they want to do.
Mm.
Mirror in the Sky is much more cohesive. It feels much more like they're all working together for
I
one
agree.
goal.
And I
Yeah.
think that plays into my reasoning why I do like Mirror better. I like the Quest. I like Mirror better. And I think my reasoning is also somewhat vanilla, almost sounds mailed in because, yes, I like more of the classic synth sounds being used. Yes, it does sound more like a band effort and the cohesiveness and they're playing. Yes, I love the longer tracks. I will always, 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 as much as I love Tormato and Future Times Rejoice and stuff on drama, I will always love From Close to the Edge until after that whole mess of epics
Yeah.
to still get a taste of that in the year 2028 or whatever it is right now on the track. I do like that. But David Watkinson, I want to relay a question from him to all three of us. Dave says,
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
real quick, his question does include a minor spoiler for the set list. And I know the tour is like almost done, but just a fair warning to people.
Okay, yeah. If you haven't seen the tour and you're going to, and you don't want to know anything about the set list, plug your ears for a moment until I wave at you. Steve, remind me to wave so they unplug their ears. So Dave says, "Do we need?" And it keeps moving. Geez, it says, Do we need after this tour another?" I don't know why it keeps moving. Another live album because it would be the first time that topographic medley would have ever been played, performed. Will we ever hear Relayer live? Why does this keep moving on me? Will we ever hear Relayer live? Um,
And what should Yes release that hasn't been released?
okay,
That's the third
well,
question there.
release would be nice. That would be a nice live one. But so I'll go first. I'm such a I don't know if sucker is the right word, but in almost my entire life, Stephen, the first album I get of a band is the live album because I want to hear them doing their thing live.
Mhm.
So I love live music. I love live albums. I loved when Rush got into the groove that they released a live DVD and album after every freaking tour. And to me, that was not an unnecessary redundancy because you get different versions. You get a surprise medley. There's all these Easter eggs. There's some song dug up from 30 years prior that they haven't played forever. So I love that, and I would love that for David. What you pointed out could be on it. And will we ever hear Relay or Live? I hope they revisit that. I don't think we need the excuse of it being an anniversary to play that whole album. And I'll stop there, and you guys feed your answers and answer his second question, and then I'll circle back. The second question being,
What was the second one again? No.
um, was
But funny enough, Dave and I were we met up last week, was
Okay.
Oh
it,
yeah, I
Dave?
saw that post. Yeah.
And one of the things we were talking about was the fact that we lost the Reload tour twice, and now it's gone.
Right.
And we were talking about the last live album and the fact that the band left the Gates of Delirium off that live album
right.
because they were going to release a live album of the Relay
They
tour,
thought they
which
were
they've
gonna...
now never done. So that version of Gates of Delirium,
So is
The
QPR
Royal
in a
the
vault
Affair
somewhere.
tour,
Obviously,
yeah.
there's no reason why they shouldn't release it now.
yeah? And is
Um,
QPR the only full view we have of that album live? Am I missing something? It's QPR only, isn't it?
Yeah, like it has all three of those tracks. Yeah.
it does,
Right.
yeah. We don't have. Do we have all of Tales live? We don't, do we?
No,
Not
not
officially,
live.
but I have the bootleg of all four of them, plus Close to the Edge, plus Roundabout on a bootleg from the Tales tour. I have
Right.
it on quarter-inch reel-to-reel of all things.
Wow. So we don't. There's some huge gaps in the Fossil record
Yeah.
for around about that time. One of the reasons why getting the Wembley show out would be great is because it fills a big gap because they were amazing.
It would have to have Future Times and Rejoice. Otherwise, just make the Richfield Coliseum show an official album from Cleveland on that tour, because that's a magnificent recording. You can hear the keys pop of the Hammond B3. It's got it's got the whole concert, and it sounds great. I don't know why that's not an official release.
Oh, okay.
But what else would you guys like to hear that they haven't done in forever, or maybe never have released live?
Oh, one of the things I'm quite disappointed about is obviously we're not going to get them get the show until next year, but just how few tracks they're playing from more recent recordings. Obviously, they're going straight into the Mirror tour. They had they played All Connected on the first date or two, didn't they? But they're only playing the opening track.
Yeah. Yeah.
As for Ultra, we keep talking about release. Funnily enough, I totally love release.
I do too. Yeah,
I would love to see them play that.
I'm playing it in my head, thinking, how would it sound just down a key and a half for John Davidson, or that'd be that's a great live song.
Yeah, it is. It potentially it is, but
and from 90125.
Our song?
Yes, thank you.
Our song. Yeah, no, I'd love to see that
live. That's a wonderful piece.
It is. It's one of my favorites, and also it swung. I've looked at a lot of 90125 tour set lists.
Now here's a Trevor song I'd like to hear live for sure. Two of them. Miracle of Life is my favorite Trevor Yes song, but I'd also love to hear, and I think Steve might agree, State of Play.
Yeah.
I would love to see Steve Howe step up to his pedal steel to do that slide part that Trevor does on. I love that song. I think that's
I'm with you completely on both of them.
But these
Absolutely.
all might be some never to be ever heard live songs.
We'll never. I wouldn't. If Trevor ever plays live, there's a good chance we might get Miracle of Life.
Yeah.
Not so sure about State of Play, but I think we might get Miracle of Life.
Miracle of Life would be great
because he loves it as well.
Song.
So, but no, I completely agree. I agree totally about those two tracks.
Cool.
Is there anything else from Big Is there anything else from Big Generator we'd like to hear? I suppose people would disagree about that.
Actually. I feel like lots of people. Well, I don't quite. I'm not quite in the same headspace, but I know lots of people love Shoot High, Aim Low.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
And I think you and I, Stephen, we each have different, opposite opinions of which side of Big Generator we prefer. I prefer the second side over the first one. So,
no, that's fine. I mean, that's totally fine. It's It's just I think, and I do say this in the book.
Yeah.
I think that the two longer tracks on side two are actually a bit weak. But a lot of Yes fans disagree. Whereas, regardless of the genre, I think side one is like a perfect little side on its own. Even the last track, which is about the least Yes track of
Almost Like Love.
Almost Like Love.
I,
I still like it as a song.
yeah,
So I think
wouldn't
side one
mind.
works.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's on side two when they try to sound like Yes that they get into trouble. I think.
I personally love Final Eyes, but I know that lots of people would probably love to hear I'm Running.
That was going to be mine. I was going to say, I would love to see I'm Running live. I think, some songs just represent better live, and you go, oh, that would be one of them for me. And Stephen, I don't want to piss you off, but Steve, I'm sure would love to hear Holy Lamb. When I told Steve, when you read what Stephen wrote about Holy Lamb, I pictured him knocking over chairs in his house to get outside.
No, because I already knew his feelings because of Yes in the 1980s. He touched on that, and it's perfectly fine. Like, I love Holy Lamb, but I can see why that wouldn't necessarily be a top pick for a live show. Although I feel like it wouldn't be tough for them to play that in a show. Like, and
no, they could
really
play
short,
it.
So,
Yeah.
But it's a John Anderson song, so it's it's very, very linked to John Anderson. It sounds like a John Anderson song, as well. So it sounds very, it sounds like that could have been on a John Anderson solo album.
And Stephen, I gather from your book, I think you and I believe Stephen, I think Stephen might be a little more indifferent to this point. And folks watching and listening, I'd love to know your take as well.
Oh, and were you supposed to wave? I forgot.
Oh yeah, you can unplug your ears. Thanks. That whole topic of ending an album with Holy Lamb or Time is Time rather than a big bang, to me, that is always just so anticlimactic. I love Time is Time. I don't want those soft songs, those cool down after the big workout. You're supposed to do that in the gym. But on an album, it's just like, yeah. I don't know. It just lets all the air out of the sail for me.
I don't mind it. It's a device, isn't it, that a lot of bands use, not just, it's let's finish on a soft one. Not necessarily epic. Let's just let people down gently. I don't mind it. I don't
thrown out the window. I
don't have a strong opinion about it, really. I think there's something to be. The one of the things I like about 90125 is the way it's sequenced.
Yeah.
So it finishes with Hearts, and that big finish to Hearts.
Yeah, and I love that song.
But also side one, it's beautifully sequenced for vinyl specifically. So side one finishes on Changes. So I cannot think of an album that's better sequenced that has a fair amount of tracks on it.
I don't think Yes has ever done this, but can either of you think of anyone that has rearranged a playlist from vinyl to CD because there's no side one or side two? Have there ever been any? I can't think of any, but it just makes sense that that'd be okay to do.
No, I can't.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. But to your point, like, I can see, like, even on the recent album Mirror to the Sky, like, the title track is a big bang epic. You very well could have ended with that. But I do like, the sort of after the big bang type thing, you get a cool down, like, epilogue type thing with something like Circles of Time. And, if it's soft, but it's very existential, and it makes me think, it makes me reflect on life, and I really appreciate that as an ending personally.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I don't don't really have a strong opinion about it. I like a big finish, and sometimes I like a little cool down. Right. It doesn't it's both can work, I think.
Something else I want to point out from your book that I found extremely interesting that I never thought of. And folks, this isn't really a spoiler because there's so much in this book. It's it's like a music critic addressing every song of every album. It's an amazing body of work. This is just such a mountain of work. So I'm not spoiling, I'm teasing it out so you get the book. But one of the things that I thought was very thought provocative for me was when you mention that the solo pieces on Fragile might not have appeared or been necessary had they taken an extra month in the studio and to just write material. Just that thought made me think, well, would we have the fish, or would we have, like, what would we have? It's just a really interesting alternative universe. And I personally, and I respect your take on this. Maybe it's because I'm a drummer, but I think that Bill's piece isn't pointless or a waste there. I think it's quirky, and one of my favorite things about it is, it starts out with that and then when Rick just comes in with that soft chord on the organ, it's such a neat little composition. But the concept that you talk about, that had they had another month rather than you do a solo, I'll do that, that's really interesting to me. Did you realize that later when you were working on the book, or had you always had that opinion since you heard the album?
Well, no, it came from factual information, which was that they were being rushed.
Okay, right.
So because in the UK, the Yes album had been a success, and Atlantic wanted something else as fast as they could possibly do it.
Yeah.
Furthermore, they just sacked a keyboard player and brought in another keyboard player who came in kind of in the middle of them rehearsing it. So it's a great big. Have you seen the Sounding Out documentaries? It's on YouTube, where Rick talks about playing Heart of the Sunrise, and he sort of said, they're all looking at me because am I meant to play now? And he's meant to be playing the piano the piano part on Heart of the Sunrise. So they were being pressed to record as fast as possible, which is kind of where all those solo pieces come from. I think is because they were a little bit short on full band material. So they said, okay, well, this sounds good. I mean, it's very early in a career to be doing something as pretentious as putting solo tracks on your album, isn't it? So it's not something you'd normally expect a band to be doing. But I think it comes from the lack of time and the lack of good new material, as much as it comes from a desire to have exciting solo tracks on the album. And Rick had to come up with something. And Rick had to come up with something because he wasn't allowed to write because he was
contractually
contracted to A&M, so he had to do a Bach piece, which also leads on to what do you do when you have to go and play Fragile live? Do you just leave out those tracks, or do you just play them anyway?
Oh, that's a great point.
Mood for a Day accepted.
I would say them. If you're going to play the whole, play it as a homage to the situation, to those players, to the pieces. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and they did that, but the one thing that they left out when they played off Fragile back in 2014 or whenever that was, and this is such a tiny thing that doesn't really matter, but they left out the part after Harvest Sunrise where it's the We Have Heaven reprise.
Oh yeah.
The other thing, there was a moment of absurdity when they did that, because to see Jeff Downes play Cans and Brahms, particularly as most of it was on tape anyway, and he was just playing along. It felt a bit odd,
awkward
seeing them play it live.
And 5% for nothing, like really odd live.
But but you're right. If you're going to do homage to it, you've got to do it. And let's face it, it's only we're only talking about a couple of minutes anyway, so it was a bit weird.
One of the other things I was reminded of in reading your book, two other great reasons of many to get the book, folks, and read it. Here's one. I was reminded of when we're talking about Relayer and John's almost like Neanderthal way of banging away at the piano, trying to explain the song. Yeah. It's amazing we got what we got, if you think about it. And true to that, when you hear some of the run-throughs of Awaken, like how did that end up being what it became? And run-throughs of some of Tales and the Relayer stuff. It's quite, I think it speaks to the extraordinary talent that the musicians really had to be able to do that
Yeah.
with something like John just not, banging away with, I'm sure, off key chords, and then it goes ba 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 ba, and then like, huh,
Yeah.
what? Okay, well, let's
Yeah.
try it.
And then crash, crash, crash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Screams, and then soon. Wait, what?
That's actually that's a really good point. And actually, although I did mention that, I wish I'd articulated that a bit better in the book, actually, because that's their ability to take. Yeah, you don't want to listen to those studio run throughs more than once or twice, do you? But they
Right.
do tell you quite a lot.
Yeah, because I'm afraid they'll
And
stick.
yeah,
For one thing. But the other thing I wanted to point out to the readers is one of the biggest things I got out of this book personally is I was reminded of so much music I hadn't heard in so long that I want to go back and revisit, and also listen to even music I am more familiar with and listen to on a more regular basis with different ears, with some of the stories behind the making of, and how they didn't make charts or how they did, and all the different elements that you've put into it kind of, for me, packages it differently, and I want to go back and revisit a lot of this stuff. So again, if you're a brand new Yes fan, if you're a hardcore freakishly hopeless Yes fan, or anywhere in the middle, there's so many different things you can get out of the book in so many
yeah,
different ways. I can't even, Steve and I both work really hard. Steve's an author. He does Yesshift. I have the largest media company in the music industry covering the world of drumming and Drum Talk TV. We work really hard. I can't imagine doing this though. I think I'd rather be shot out of a cannon on fire. It seems easier than what you did here. I mean this as a huge compliment, just to commend you on the tension that went into this, and the nice color section. We'll call that the middle eight of all the album covers and everything. This is really like, how do you talk about following up 90125? What are you going to do next? Like, this is just so grandiose. What do you do?
You're right in that I have a lot less time than I used to, because when I wrote that book, I wrote it. The lion's share of the work was done in 2018. And at the time, I was just starting out Sonicbond Publishing, which is my publishing company that publishes, we're up to 170 books now. I'm looking at my shelves.
Wow.
So am I right? And we were starting out. So we're in that sort of period when I started the company, I commissioned some books, but none of them had actually been delivered. So I had more time to sit down and physically write. I knew that I was going to have to write a few of them, of the early ones as well. Now I don't. However, the next book, I did the book with David Watkinson, and I wrote. I mean, the Yes in the 80s, the text was written by me. I did. What else have I done? I did a book about focus relatively recently that took a long time to write. But the next Yes book will be about 90125. Because we're launching a new series next year called, well, at the moment it's called Rock Classics, and they will be single album books. It's not a new idea. People have done it in the past. Kevin Mulrines, obviously, a lot of the episodes they're doing at the moment are based around tales.
Yeah.
So these will be a bit more like the 33 and a third series, where looking at a specific album, how it's recorded, a review of it, and context, really. Nice. So because I've done so much research into 90125 in the last few months, I will take what I've done and expand it into a book. There's loads more things that can be said, I think, about that album. And it's the way it came to record, as I was saying before, was so unusual, so unique, and that there's a lot to say about it. I think it's not just for Yes fans, but for people who are interested in the very strange ways that music gets to be made.
Yeah,
sometimes.
That's a great point. And before we have, if you have a little more time, we have just a couple more questions we planned.
Yeah, fire on.
One just popped up that I'd like you to share with the viewers. Remind us about your publishing company. What type of works do you do? It's not all music related, correct?
It is now pretty
Oh,
much.
is
Yeah,
it?
we did.
Okay.
When the
Yeah.
company was first founded, the idea was to do music, film, and TV, and we did a few. I wrote a couple, in fact, but to be honest, they didn't sell as well. So I decided relatively early on in the history of the company that okay, well let's polarize and let's focus on doing books on music. So the majority of the books are in. I mean the best known series is the one this is in.
Yeah.
It's
On
the On Track
track.
series. So probably I would guess 75% of the books we've done have been in that series, but we've done other things as well. We've done the odd. We do the odd one off. We've just done a autobiography of Jeff Mann, the singer of Twelfth Night.
Yeah.
Did the autobiography of David Payton as
Oh,
well, who some people will know. He was the lead singer. Well, in Britain, he's known as the lead singer of Pilot.
yeah.
We had a couple of massive hits in Britain, but also he's in the Alan Parsons Project, and he's worked with Kate Bush. He was basically a session
Oh,
bassist for many years. So we've done that. There's a few other series as well. We did a series called The Decades, which is what the Yes in the 80s was in.
okay.
So the company started. In fact, we're just about to come up to our fifth anniversary.
Oh,
At the end of
nice.
November
Oh, nice.
will be the fifth anniversary. So it's and we're now up to I think I counted them earlier, 171 titles.
Congratulations. And what are some of the other bands covered in the On Track series?
Well, it varies. I mean, the two bestsellers so far, and this will be no surprise, are Yes and Genesis.
Oh, I got to get the Genesis one.
Yeah.
I'm a
And
huge
It's
Genesis
it,
fan.
that was published in 2019, I think. We haven't revised it yet because there's nothing much to revise it with in that case.
Yeah. Oh, I got to get that.
Unfortunately, but we've
I
done everybody from. I'm just looking at the new ones on my shelf: Smashing Pumpkins, Lou Reed,
oh,
Metallica, The Byrds,
wow.
um, Queen, Green Day, Beck, Nightwish. I'm just looking.
That's
It's
yeah. And
we're doing the Carpenters in December.
Oh,
It's
wow.
oh, nice.
the genre does not matter. In fact, I actively discuss. You know what music critics can be like. Sometimes they don't like a particular genre, so they slag it off in their reviews.
Right,
I
right.
I actually discourage that because I think it's all good.
Yeah.
We don't. It's
Yeah.
Too
I'm
biased
not
that way.
bothered. I'm not biased. Easy listening is as valid as progressive rock as far as I'm concerned. So I might listen to it less.
I'd be very interested in the one about the Carpenters because I grew up as a little boy with that music in the house. Coincidentally, I grew up with the Carpenters, the Fifth Dimension, and Simon and Garfunkel all played mostly by Hal Blaine on the drums. When I started Drum Talk TV in the first year, I interviewed Hal Blaine at his house and talked about John Denver as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
not Bob.
He's a ledge. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
years later, I did Hal Blaine's last interview before he passed away, like a month before he passed away. Just you talk about a man full of stories, just unbelievable. He talked about being under the stage at Woodstock when the Who was playing and partying with them. It's just like what, just crazy stories. So he's talked a lot about Karen Carpenter and the Carpenters and the mom and how that whole lot of interesting stuff that I have on some interviews with him. I'll send you if you're interested.
Yeah, love to. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Good stuff.
what's the status of Yes in the 1990s that Simon Barrow is working on?
Simon has not delivered it yet, so
Okay.
so it keeps going back through Simon's gone through a period of quite bad health recently.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
So it's just delayed the book coming in, so it'll be I haven't checked in with him in the last few weeks, but it'll be next year now. It'll come.
Okay.
It'll definitely come, but it'll be next year now, I would have thought. So there won't be anything. So that'll be the next Yessy thing. My book on 90125, which my expanded version of 9, it'll be much later in the year, I think.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, hoping Simon gets well, of course.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you are also a host for the Summer's End Festival. Can you give us a rundown of how the most recent one earlier this month went, as well as what
There's the
people can look
T-shirt. There you
forward
go.
to
There it
with
is.
Winter's End in April?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
describe
yeah.
it for
No,
those not
it went very
familiar.
well.
Yeah.
It's Summer's End started in 2005, so the 20th Summer's End will be in 2025.
Wow.
So the last edition. Well, we kind of know what we're doing now, so it went as expected, which was fine. It ran to time and everything. I suppose from a yes point of view, the interesting thing about Winter's End, which is in middle of next April,
Yeah.
is that we've got Oliver Wakeman's band playing. He
Oh,
was going to be playing Summer's End, but he had to postpone because a member of his band had a family bereavement, unfortunately.
Right.
So, which meant he couldn't put the time in he wanted into prep, because this is a one-off show. So, I mean, other things might come a bit later, but at the moment, this is a one-off show. So Oliver's band will be playing at Winter's End, and they are playing the From a Page album / EP, whatever you call it.
nice.
And that, which might be the only time it ever gets played live.
And this is in April?
This is the middle of April. This is the day he's playing is, I think, Sunday the 14th of April.
Okay, we'll have Oliver on before then to talk about it.
Yeah, Oliver's a great guy, so he's I'm sure he'd be happy to. But it's he's going to play songs from across his career, including he's got a new album out, hopefully during the early part of next year.
Great.
And he's
On
pulled together an all-star band to play this, but they're rehearsing just for that show, which is a bit scary for everybody. But Oliver's a total professional, so he'll
yeah, extremely talented, just amazing.
Yeah.
I'm glad he was able to take that music and do what he did with From a Page. That's really neat. That's a great addition to the catalog, especially under the circumstances and everything. It kind of fills a missing chapter, if you will.
It does, and not enough. I'm sure that not enough people have heard it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely agree.
Like I remember reading that tweet back in the day where he detailed someone asked him what were some of the songs that didn't make it onto Fly From Here that he worked on, and he mentions the titles, and I was like, oh man, I wish we'd gotten those on something. And then like a year later, From a Page announced it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, it must have taken a lot of work to piece all that stuff together.
Yeah.
And Stephen, what is your publishing company name so that we could put that website in the comments?
It's called Sonicbond, all one word, SONICBOND Publishing.
And is that .co.uk?
It's .co. It's .com. The .com works.
Okay, Steve, you got that?
There'll be a new website in November, hopefully.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. All right, great.
Yeah. Thanks so much for taking time to join us. And more importantly, I'm going to put up the graphic again. Thank you so much for putting out. Oh, it disappeared. So here you go. This amazing book. What an incredible body of work. And, the master there on the cover.
I'll hold it up as well. There you go.
Chris Squire.
Backgammon suit. There you go. Yeah. A trifecta. 3 books for each neck of Chris's bass there.
Yeah, true.
Which he borrowed and never gave back, which is a whole other story.
Yeah.
But this is great. Get it, folks. If you're a Yes fan at all, get the book. It's really a
Burning Shed, Amazon. Just go ahead and get it.
Yep. It's I think it should be in the US by now as well. I think. So yeah.
Cool. Hang on the line for a few minutes after we say goodbye to the audience. And audience, thank you so much for following what we do here on Yesshift. We are also open to ideas, suggestions, comments, not criticism, though. No, I'm kidding. You can send us anything you want. Love notes, hate mail, anything in between to yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. If you like audio only, we show so many clips and images sometimes. You might want to follow us on the other channels. But if you want audio only, it's anchor.fm/Yesshift. On YouTube, it's youtube.com/@Yesshift. And on Facebook, where we broadcast live, it all starts there at facebook.com/ Oh, Yesshift. Thanks again, Stephen, so much for taking time. Hang on the line. And Steve, did I miss anything?
No, you pretty much got it.
Cool. Should we close with Holy Lamb?
Oh, just kidding. I'll just sing it
my dead
karaoke
body.
Style. All of a sudden, Stephen Lamb's internet goes bad. All right, folks. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.